Now, one thing I've been eager to see, and I think quite a few people out there have been anticipating this, are the viewership numbers for Skeleton Crew, to find out just how many people are, or maybe are not, watching this new show, this new Star Wars show on Disney+. And yes, we already have gotten some numbers from some sites that report on this sort of thing, like Illuminate, where the show, it didn't crack the top 10 original new shows for the week, or the week of its debut, or the week of its first 2 episodes dropping. However, we've mainly been waiting for Nielsen to give us their numbers, since they're generally regarded as the most accurate out there. Problem is, they usually take about 3 extra weeks, or they're 3 weeks behind, so you gotta wait a bit longer to get them. And well, we finally did get them, again for the week of the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew, and it didn't crack the top 10 there either. And since it didn't manage to do that, we don't know what the numbers on it actually were or are. Nielsen only gives the numbers for the top 10 shows. So all we can truly know for sure is that it got less than 382 million minutes of watch time that first week, which is what the 10th place show on that list got. All we can really be sure of is Skeleton Crew, the new Star Wars show, couldn't beat out the Great British Baking Show for 10th place. And look, no disrespect intended towards the Great British Baking Show, or any other show on this list for that matter. But Star Wars, of all things, of all franchises, it shouldn't lose to them, or should at the very least be up there competing with them, putting up a strong and worthy fight. Even if, in Skeleton Crew's defense here, Netflix and some of the other streaming services do tend to drop all their episodes of a series at once, meaning obviously there's more chance for them to get more minutes of viewership since there's just more minutes to watch. But let's be real, that's not the reason why Skeleton Crew lost to those other shows or couldn't even crack the top 10. It lost to them because, simply put, not enough people care or wanted to watch this show for various reasons. And yes, one of them could certainly be, and I think is, that it just doesn't look like the best show ever, even though it has been quite good in my opinion. But I'm sure plenty of people out there, the more casual fan, the average viewer, or even the hardcore fans that are losing hope or have all but lost hope in the franchise, they may have caught the trailer or seen a commercial or heard it called Goonies in Space and thought, you know what, I think I'm just going to skip this one. And even though that has no doubt hurt it to, again, some degree, without question, the main reason why many aren't tuning in, and a great many it seems, and why on average the viewership numbers for Star Wars in general for the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus continues to decline, which we'll get more into that in just a bit, well, it's because people just don't care about Star Wars anymore. And that's because, more often than not, it hasn't been all that good. Star Wars went from something many considered must-watch simply because it was Star Wars, simply because of that name, that of course I'm going to watch a new Star Wars show. I'm not going to be the only person who skips it and doesn't get to talk about it. But it's gone from that to something they think twice about, if at all about, because they're tired of watching or trying out these shows and all too often getting mediocrity at best. Not getting something truly worthy of that epic Star Wars name, and thus that name, Star Wars, just doesn't mean the same thing to them anymore.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
And though you could argue this is just going to be a personal anecdote, but I have seen the change. And I'm not just talking the thousands and thousands of comments I have read in the comment sections of my videos where people tell me what they think of Star Wars, why they are or are not watching it, or how they feel about it, or how they feel about Disney, and all of that. I'm talking about a general loss of interest in Star Wars from people that I talk to in my daily life, if you will. I used to get all the time from friends and family, people I know personally, the question, what's going on with Star Wars? Or what is the next show? Or when can we expect another movie? And there would be, excitement in their voice. They would genuinely want to know. I would get calls or texts or messages from them when a new show was going on asking, what is the deal with this character? Or what does this all mean? Or what do you think is going to happen? Nowadays, though, I rarely get anything like that, and rarely even get any of them asking what is coming next or bringing up Star Wars at all. I'm generally the one who brings it up or tells them about the next show because I just want to talk some Star Wars. And the response I get when talking about the next show is generally, so what's this one going to be about? And they don't say it or ask it in a, I'm intrigued already and really want to know way. It's said in a more, this probably isn't going to interest me, but tell me anyway because I can tell this is important to you sort of way. And sadly, despite the fact that I have said good things about Skeleton Crew to any of my friends and family who are willing to listen to me talk about it, none of them, not a single person I know, is watching it. Though one of my nephews, who is a pretty big Star Wars fan, he does want to watch it or will eventually watch it. He just doesn't currently have Disney Plus, and he has yet to take up my offer about coming over and watching it together. But anyway, let's take a closer look and see just how bad the numbers for Skeleton Crew are, or potentially are. Again, we don't actually have them. We only know it got less than 382 million minutes of watch time in its first week, or the first 2 episodes, which could mean it had 381 million minutes and just barely missed the top 10. Or, yeah, it could mean that it had significantly less than that, and the numbers are truly disastrous. Only Disney knows for sure since they have the actual numbers, but they only share them or have shared them in the past for other shows when they're either very positive or they can be construed or spun in a positive way. For example, for The Acolyte, they boasted how when it came out in June of last year, that the first episode was the most watched first episode of any of their new shows in 2024. Keyword being their new shows on Disney Plus, and if you would look at the other shows to have come out last year before it, well, there wasn't a ton of competition. But anyway, let's be extremely kind here to Skeleton Crew. Let's do the best case scenario for the show or for the numbers, for the viewership, and assume it did just barely miss the top 10 and got 381 million minutes of watch time. How would that compare to the other Disney Plus shows and seasons, or their debut episode or episodes of a season that we did get numbers on from Nielsen in the past? Which turns out to be every show other than the first season of The Mandalorian. We have no numbers from that one at all, and not because it didn't do very well and didn't crack the top 10, but because Nielsen wasn't doing streaming service numbers at the time. And so the fairest way to do this, since the raw numbers or millions of minutes watched per show cannot be directly compared when you consider the fact that some premiere episodes may be significantly longer than others, not to mention a lot of Disney Plus shows have had 2 or even 3 episode premieres. So the fairest way to do this for comparison's sake is to take the numbers we have from Nielsen, the millions of minutes watched, and divide it by the length of the episode or episodes released that first week to get a very approximate number of views, which also isn't a perfect way to do this, but it is the best metric we can use here for comparison given the limited amount of data we have to work with. And so when we do all the math here, we see that, well, this is what it looks like. And keep in mind, again, this is the best case scenario for Skeleton Crew. This is assuming it just barely missed out on the top 10. It could be, and almost certainly is to some degree, worse than this. And even best case scenario, it is in last place, just behind Andor's premiere episodes. There were 3 of them, though in Andor's defense, that week opening showing may be partly because, it did drop 3 episodes all at once, and thus it having the longest watch time in the first place means maybe not everyone sat down and just watched or binged all 3 episodes in a row that first week. It even had a pretty big bump in viewership its second week, or with the 4th episode, potentially supporting that theory that people were still trying to catch up with the first 3 episodes. Furthermore, it held rather strong throughout the course of the season, averaging around 7 to 9 million views per episode, with the finale getting 11.8 million views, beating out Ahsoka's finale just barely, and crushing The Acolyte, which didn't make the Nielsen top 10 most weeks during its run, or only made it with the first couple episodes and then the finale. Which is, of course, why that show ultimately got canceled. The numbers simply were not there, especially when you compare it to something like, just take a look at The Mandalorian's numbers, those first 2 seasons, which I think begins to show just how much potential a Star Wars show has, or could have, or once had, or should have, if it's actually good, that is, or starts out very strong like The Mandalorian did with that first season and very first episode, which had Grogu in it and just captured the hearts and minds of so many people. Even a lot of non-Star Wars fans, as I've said before, just love Grogu and watch the show for him. Though all that said, I don't know how good Season 3 of The Mandalorian was, but it did bring in some very strong numbers regardless, and in large part off the back of those first 2 seasons. Now, what does that all mean for Skeleton Crew? Well, if you're someone who has been enjoying it, which I personally have, well, I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for a Season 2 announcement anytime soon, if ever. Though that said, Alan Bergman, the co-chairman of Disney Entertainment, said not too long ago in an interview that they'd seen some improvement with the numbers and were happy with the critical praise for the show, so who knows. Still don't think that means you should hold your breath, but it will be curious to see how the show does in the coming weeks, or as we get more numbers from Nielsen for previous episodes and for the finale next week eventually. We'll see if it manages to crack the top 10 at some point, and who knows, maybe even stay there till the end. Either way, this isn't a great start for Skeleton Crew. There is no way to spin this positively for the show. Yes, it has been good, it's been entertaining, but these numbers are an absolute disaster. This is bad. Even if you want to try and argue this is supposed to be more of a kid's show, that it wasn't trying to capture a broad audience, which is kind of ridiculous. Of course, they want a broad audience with this show. It is a family-friendly show too. But my point is, they're not going to put out something, they're not going to spend $130 million and target just children. They wanted everyone to watch this, so these numbers are a failure. Again, there is no other way to put it. This is a sad showing for Star Wars, and one does have to once again ask, after the failure of this show and the Acolyte before it, not to mention previous failures out of Star Wars, but one has to again ask how long it is until we see some major changes at Lucasfilm. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. What do you think about these numbers and the state of Star Wars in general? Do you think there is hope for the show? Do you think we somehow will get a season 2? Will the numbers improve? Or is this a one and done series, even though the creators have said there is room for more? Whatever the case may be though, leave your comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.